Before the start of World War II in 1939, Argentina had maintained a long tradition of neutrality regarding European wars, which had been upheld and defended by all major political parties since the 19th century. One of the main reasons for this policy was related to Argentina's economic position as one of the world's leading exporters of foodstuffs and agricultural products, to Europe in general and to the United Kingdom in particular. Relations between Britain and Argentina had been strong since the mid-19th century, due to the large volume of trade between both countries, the major presence of British investments particularly in railroads and banking, as well as British immigration. 1. And the policy of neutrality had ensured the food supply of Britain during World War I against the German U-boat campaign. 2-3. British influence over the Argentine economy was resented by nationalistic groups. 4. While German and Italian influence in Argentina was strong and growing mainly due to increased interwar trade and investment, and the presence of numerous immigrants from both countries, which, together with the refusal to break relations with the Axis powers as the war progressed, furthered the belief that the Argentine government was sympathetic to the German cause. 5. Because of strong divisions and internal disputes between members of the Argentine military, 3. Argentina remained neutral for most of World War II, despite pressure from the United States to join the Allies. 6. Argentina eventually gave in to the Allies' pressure, broke relations with the Axis powers on 26 January 1944. 7. And declared war on 27 March 1945. 8. Pre-war political and economic background. Before the Great Depression. In 1916, following the enactment of universal and secret male suffrage by conservative President Roque Sáenz Peña, the voting franchise was expanded, and electoral transparency improved, leading to the first truly free presidential elections in the country. As a result of these electoral changes, Hipólito Yrigoyen, leader of the centrist Radical Civic Union, UCR, was elected president of Argentina. Under the successive administrations of Presidents Yrigoyen, 1916-1922, and Marcelo Torquato de Alvear, 1922-1928, Argentina continued the trend of strong economic growth and democratic consolidation that had begun under previous administrations, matching countries such as Canada or Australia in per capita income. 9. While the government enacted social and economic reforms and extended assistance to small farms and businesses. Beginning in 1928, Yrigoyen's second administration faced a crippling economic crisis, precipitated by the Great Depression. 10. In 1930, Yrigoyen was ousted from power by the military led by José Félix Uriburu, in what became the first military coup in modern Argentine history, marking the beginning of what would be later called the infamous decade in Argentina. 1930 military coup. Supported by nationalistic sectors of the military, Uriburu tried to implement major changes to Argentine politics and government, banning political parties, suspending elections, and suspending the 1853 Constitution, with the aim to reorganizing Argentina along corporatist and fascist lines. However, Uriburu's policies would face widespread opposition from civil society and from conservative factions of the military, and only a year later, in 1931, he was forced to step down. Thus, in November 1931, the military government called for elections, but only after banning UCR candidates and organizing a system that was broadly recognized as fraudulent. It was under these conditions that General Agustín P. Justo was elected president. 1112. Presidency of Agustín P. Justo. General Agustín P. Justo orchestrated the practice of electoral fraud that became prevalent during the 1930s in Argentina. Elected on 8 November 1931, Justo was supported by a newly created conservative party known as Concordancia, which was born as an alliance between the National Democratic Party, dissident sectors of the Radical Civic Union that had opposed Hipólito Yrigoyen, and the Independent Socialist Party. Still reeling from the aftermath of the Great Depression, Justo's government at first undertook fiscally conservative economic policies, reducing public expenditure and restricting the circulation of currency in an attempt to strengthen the public coffers. However, as in other countries during this period, Keynesian ideas were eventually implemented, and more emphasis was placed on public works and infrastructure, resulting in the creation of the National Office of Public Highways, expansion of the road network, creation of the Junta Nacional de Granos, National Grain Board, and the Junta Nacional de Carnes, National Meat Board, and in 1935, creation of the Central Bank of the Argentine Republic. Under the advice of economist Otto Niemeyer, 13. In foreign policy, the most pressing issue of the Justo administration was the restoration of international trade, which had collapsed following the Great Depression. As a byproduct of Black Tuesday and the Wall Street crash of 1929, Great Britain, principal economic partner of Argentina in the 1920s and 1930s, had taken measures to protect the meat supply market in the Commonwealth. At the 1932 Imperial Conference negotiations in Ottawa, bowing to pressure, mainly from Australia and South Africa, Britain had decided to severely curtail imports of Argentine beef. 14. The plan provoked an immediate outcry in Buenos Aires, and the Argentine government dispatched Vice President Roca and a team of negotiators to London. As a result of these negotiations, on 1 May 1933, the bilateral treaty known as the Roca-Runciman Treaty was signed between Argentina and the United Kingdom, which guaranteed Argentina a beef export quota that was equivalent to the levels sold in 1932, in exchange for Argentina reducing tariffs on almost 350 British goods to 1930 rates and to refrain from imposing duties on coal. Strengthening the commercial ties between Argentina and Britain and ensuring a trade surplus during the turmoil of the Great Depression, but drawing ire from nationalistic sectors and several opposition senators, including the denunciations of liberal Senator Lisandro de la Torre, who claimed that Britain received the most benefits from the treaty. 15. Ratified by the Argentine Senate. The Roca-Runciman Treaty lasted 3 years and was renewed for another 3 years as the Eden-Malbrán Treaty of 1936. 16. Argentina under Justo would also rejoin the League of Nations and hold state visits to Presidents Getúlio Vargas of Brazil and Gabriel Terra of Uruguay, signing commercial treaties with those nations. Justo's foreign minister, Carlos Saavedra Lamas, would also serve an important role as a mediator in the Chaco War between Bolivia and Paraguay, helping both countries reach a peace deal, thus winning the 1936 Nobel Peace Prize. Mounting political tensions. In the aftermath of the 1930 military coup and the subsequent accusations of electoral fraud against Justo, political tensions in Argentina would remain high throughout the 1930s. On 5 April 1931, supporters of deposed President Yrigoyen won the elections for governor in the province of Buenos Aires, but the government of Uriburu declared the elections invalid. On December, facing uprisings by UCR supporters, Justo decreed a state of siege and again imprisoned the old Yrigoyen, as well as Alvear, Ricardo Rojas, Honorio Pueyrredón, and other leading figures of the party. 17. In 1933, attempted revolts continued. Buenos Aires, Corrientes, Entre Rios, and Misiones would be the stage of UCR uprisings, which ended with more than 1,000 people being detained. Seriously ill, Yrigoyen was returned to Buenos Aires and kept under house arrest. He died on 3 June, and his burial in La Recoleta Cemetery was the occasion of a mass demonstration. In December, during a meeting of the National Convention of the UCR, A joint uprising by the military and politicians broke loose in Santa Fe, Rosario, and Paso de los Libres. José Benjamin Abalos, who was Irigoyen's former minister, and Colonel Roberto Bosch were arrested during the uprising, and the organizers and leaders of the party were imprisoned at Martin Garcia. Former President Marcelo Torquato de Alvear was exiled by the government, while others were detained in the penitentiary in Ushuaia. In 1935, Alvear was allowed to return from exile as part of a gentleman's agreement with Justo, with Alvear promising there would be no more violent rebellions in exchange for Justo promising an end to fraudulent elections. Thus, Alvear took on leadership of the UCR party, vowing that the UCR would once again take part in elections and to continue the fight against fraudulent practices. That same year, once again amid accusations of fraud, the Justo administration managed to secure the victory of its candidate Manuel Fresco for governor of the province of Buenos Aires, but it could not avoid the UCR victory of Amadeo Sabatini for governor in Cordoba, despite bloody incidents that aimed at disrupting the election. Meanwhile, the province of Santa Fe, under the leadership of opposition Democratic Progressive Party Governor Luciano Molinas, was the subject of a federal intervention by the national government. In 1937, presidential elections were to be held. Alvear, together with his running mate Enrique Mosca, campaigned across the country, vowing that not even fraud could defeat them. Meanwhile, the ruling Concordancia Party nominated lawyer Roberto Marcelino Ortiz from the dissident anti-Irigoyen UCR faction as presidential candidate, with conservative lawmaker Ramon Castillo as his running mate. The 1937 presidential elections were held in September. Completely flouting on his promise, Justo kept his political and security forces busy on election day. Amid widespread reports of intimidation, ballot stuffing, and voter roll tampering, whereby, according to one observer, democracy was extended to the hereafter, Ortiz won the elections handily. 18. German and Swiss banks. The Nazis, having some presence in Argentina since the mid-1920s, had a peak of 2,110 local members in 1935. 19. At some point, German-Argentine millionaire Ludwig Freud, who oversaw Buenos Aires German Overseas Bank, a subsidiary of Deutsche Bank, established contacts with Swiss banks. 2021-22. An early 1940s investigation ordered by anti-Nazi President Roberto M. Ortiz identified 12,000 Nazi sympathizers in Argentina who had contributed some USD $40.5 million, $2,025 currency, to a single account at Schweizerisch Kreditanstalt, later acquired by Credit Suisse. 2021-22. The government documents cite the German Overseas Bank, the nearby German South American Bank (EAS), a subsidiary of Dresdner Bank and the site of the Nazi headquarters. 19. Freud, and others linked to companies blacklisted by the Allies such as IG Farben, which supplied the Nazis with Zyklon B. In 1943, Juan Perón's fascist United Officers Group destroyed all known copies of the list, but in 1984, a copy was obtained by an employee of an Argentine state-owned bank, reportedly housed in the former Nazi headquarters. 2021-23. In 2020, the list was shared with the Simon Wiesenthal Center, SWC, which theorized that funds derived from Nazi plunder was sent to the listed Nazis for deposit in the Swiss account for Nazi Germany to withdraw in exchangeable, non-German currency. 24. The SWC requested access to Credit Suisse's archives to determine if wealth looted from Holocaust victims was still being held. 25-26. Beginning of the war. Political situation. Roberto M. Ortiz came to power through the system of electoral fraud, but soon after taking office, he tried to dismantle it. Despite winning the presidency in 1937, in a process that was widely recognized as fraudulent by both the government and the opposition. 27. By 1939, Ortiz's government had made democratic normalization a priority of its agenda. 27. To achieve this aim, the administration resorted to federal interventions, but in the opposite way that these had been used under Justo. Intervening those provinces where governors had won by proven fraud, namely San Juan, Santiago del Estero, Catamarca, and Buenos Aires, while respecting the results and autonomy in those provinces with no irregularities, including those where elections had been won by the opposition UCR, such as the cases of Tucumán, October 1938 and March 1939, as well as Córdoba, March 1940. In 1940, legislative elections were held in a clean fashion, giving the opposition UCR a majority in Congress. 28. This policy of democratic restoration would soon put the administration of Ortiz at odds with the more conservative factions of his own ruling Concordancia party, including conservative Vice President Ramón Castillo. 27. The opposition UCR, in turn, was divided between FORJA, a political grouping that consisted of hardline supporters of deposed UCR President Hipólito Yrigoyen, who died in 1933, and opposed any form of cooperation with the government, and the majoritarian faction of the UCR under the official leadership of Alvear, who, while also remaining in opposition to the government, soon adopted a more conciliatory tone to the Ortiz administration as a result of these changes. The two other major parties, the Socialist Party and the Liberal Democratic Progressive Party, would also remain in opposition to the government. Meanwhile, the Communist Party, also staunchly opposed to the government, initially followed a policy of courting the trade unions and gave priority to supporting the international stance of the Soviet Union. 29. Economically, recovery from the Great Depression had been underway since 1933, but the beginning of the war resulted in changes to the Argentine economy, as imports from Europe were reduced. Thus began a process of import substitution industrialization, which had some antecedents during the Great Depression. This led to a process of internal migration as well, with people living in the countryside or in small villages moving to urban centers. 30. Initial diplomatic reaction. At the beginning of the Second World War on 1 September 1939, the Argentine government proclaimed its neutrality in the conflict. On 3 September, the diplomatic representatives of the United Kingdom and France informed the Argentine government that their countries had entered a state of war against Nazi Germany. Following the initial policies of other states in the Americas, the Ortiz government issued a decree on 4 September 1939, declaring Argentine neutrality in the conflict. To enforce the observance of neutrality, on 14 September 1939, Ortiz issued a second presidential decree, creating a special commission integrated by representatives from each ministry, housed on the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and chaired by a delegate from this ministry. 28. Battle of the River Plate. The German pocket battleship Admiral Graf Spee took part in the Battle of the River Plate and was scuttled by her captain after being damaged in combat. On 13 December 1939, the Battle of the River Plate took place. During this battle, the German pocket battleship Admiral Graf Spee was severely damaged by British ships on the waters of the River Plate estuary. Cornered, the German captain Hans Langsdorff ordered the scuttling of the ship 31, while the crew were taken under custody and interned by Uruguayan and Argentine authorities. 31. While under custody, Hans Langsdorff later committed suicide at the Immigrants Hotel in Buenos Aires, while the crew was eventually released, a dozen of them taking residence in Argentina and Uruguay. 32. Aborted attempt to join the Allies. In December 1939, partly as a consequence of the Battle of the River Plate, the Ortiz government concluded that the worldwide nature of the conflict would eventually make neutrality untenable and impossible to maintain. 3. Thus, Minister of Foreign Affairs José María Cantillo was tasked with drafting a proposal, under which Argentina, together with the United States and eventually other Latin American states, would join the Allies as non-belligerent states, offering economic and diplomatic support to the European allies. The Argentine cargo ship Uruguay, stopped and scuttled by the German submarine U-37 on 27 May 1940-33. In April 1940, Foreign Affairs Minister Cantillo made a visit to United States Ambassador Normal Armour, presenting the Argentine proposal for the United States, Argentina, and other Latin American states to join the war together as non-belligerent parties. 3. However, the Argentine proposal suffered from bad timing, as then U.S. President Franklin Roosevelt was in the midst of a challenging and controversial re-election campaign for an unprecedented third term in office. To make things worse, on 12 May 1940, the Argentine proposal was leaked to the press and was published nationwide by Argentine daily newspaper La Nación, leading to much confusion in the country and outrage among nationalist groups who demanded Ortiz's resignation. On 13 May, the Argentine government issued a communiqué acknowledging the existence of the proposal, and on 18 May another communiqué was issued, clarifying that Argentina would continue to observe the most strict neutrality in the conflict. 3. The leak of this proposal at an early stage of the conflict, together with the perceived diplomatic snub, severely weakened the position of the Ortiz administration and of pro-Allied factions within the Argentine government, intensifying nationalist sentiment and opposition to Ortiz in military circles. 3. Ortiz's resignation and growing divisions. Vice President Ramón Castillo, a conservative politician from Catamarca province, became acting president of Argentina following the leave of absence by Ortiz in 1940. From the beginning of his administration, Ortiz had been suffering from diabetes, and his health continued to deteriorate throughout his presidency. By 3 July 1940, after only 2 years in office, Ortiz had lost much of his eyesight, and thus he requested a temporary leave of absence from his duties as president, being replaced by conservative Vice President Ramón S. Castillo, who became acting president. 28. During Castillo's tenure, stances towards the war became more complex as the conflict developed. The main political parties, newspapers, and intellectuals supported the Allies, yet Castillo maintained neutrality. Meanwhile, Ortiz was in leave of absence and unable to serve as president, but he did not resign from office. The position of Argentina vis-à-vis the war generated disputes between them, with Castillo often prevailing. 34. Despite several treatments from Argentine ophthalmologists and the kind gesture of support from President Roosevelt, who sent one of the best ophthalmologists from the United States to provide treatment as well, Ortiz's health got progressively worse, until he finally lost his eyesight completely. On 27 June 1942, he would present his full resignation to the presidency, and Vice President Castillo took office as president to fulfill the remaining 2 years of his mandate. 28. Only 18 days after his resignation, Ortiz died. 28. Meanwhile, among civil society and the main political parties, support for Argentine intervention on the Allied side continued to grow and became widespread as the war progressed. The main pro-Allied advocacy organization was Acción Argentina, founded on 5 June 1940 from a proposal of the Socialist Party. The initial manifesto of Acción Argentina was drafted by former President Marcelo T. de Alvear, and leading members of the organization included major intellectuals, journalists, artists, and politicians from a wide ideological spectrum. Among them Alicia Maro de Justo, Americo Gioldi, José Aguirre Camara, Mauricio Yadarola, Rodolfo Fitt, Rafael Pivotal, Raul C. Monsegur, Federico Pindo, Jorge Bullrich, Alejandro Ceballos, Julio A. Noble, Victoria Campo, Emilio Ravignani, Nicolás Repetto, Mariano Villar Sainz Peña, and Juan Valmaggia. The organization grew to encompass 300 chapters across the country and organized political meetings and protests, propaganda posters, leaflets, and even direct actions attempting to expose Nazi activity in the country. 35. Former President Marcelo T. de Alvear remained a leading advocate for the entry of Argentina on the Allied side, and a major political figure until his death in 1942. On the side of those opposing entry into the war, FORJA was the only political party that supported neutrality throughout the war, seeing it as an opportunity to get rid of what they considered British meddling with the Argentine economy. Starting in 1940, the FORJA faction led by Delapien and Del Mazo had drifted away from the organization and rejoined the UCR, while FORJA itself adopted more nationalistic and left-wing ideas under the leadership of Arturo Jorech. 36. Nationalistic sectors of the army also promoted neutrality as a way to oppose the United Kingdom and its economic influence. Notably during this time, a plan was made by the Naval War College to invade the Falkland Islands, but was never put into operation. 37. On the other hand, the newspaper El Pampero, financed by the German embassy, actively supported Hitler. 38. Within the Argentine army, Germanophile sentiments were strong among many officers, an influence that predated both world wars, having been steadily growing since 1904. Generally, it did not involve a rejection of democracy, but rather an admiration of German military history, which combined with an intense Argentine nationalism influenced the main stance of the army towards the war, maintaining neutrality. The arguments in favor ranged from support for the Argentine military tradition, as the country had been neutral during both World War I and the War of the Pacific, to a rejection of foreign attempts to coerce Argentina into joining a war perceived as a conflict between foreign countries with no Argentine interests at stake, to outright Anglophobia. 39. Though only a handful of military leaders actually supported Adolf Hitler, and pro-Axis positions were a minority, their true influence inside the army remains difficult to ascertain, as their advocates generally disguised themselves and adopted nationalist arguments. 3. Meanwhile, the Communist Party aligned itself with the diplomatic policies of the Soviet Union. As a result, it supported neutrality and opposed the British influence in Argentina during the early stages of the war, in line with the Treaty of Non-Aggression between Germany and the Soviet Union. The launching of Operation Barbarossa and the consequent Soviet entry in the war changed that attitude. Some Trotskyists promoted the fight against the Third Reich as an early step of an international class struggle. As for the Castillo administration, there are a number of interpretations for his reasons for staying neutral. One such perspective focuses on the Argentine tradition of neutrality. Others see Castillo as a nationalist, not being influenced by the power structure in Buenos Aires, since he was from Catamarca, so that, with the support of the army, he could simply defy the pressure to join the Allies. A similar interpretation considers instead that Castillo simply had no power to go against the wishes of the army, and if he declared war, he would be deposed in a military coup. A third point of view considers that the U.S. was the sole promoter of Argentina's entry into the war, whereas the United Kingdom benefited from Argentine neutrality as it was a major supplier of beef and wheat. This, however, fails to acknowledge the Anglophile faction's constant requests to declare war. 40. Most likely, it was a combination of the desires of the British diplomacy and the Argentine army, which prevailed over the pro-war factions. 41. Socialist deputy Enrique Dickmann created a commission in the National Congress to investigate a rumored German attempt to seize Patagonia and then conquer the rest of the country. The conservative deputy Videla Dorna claimed that the real risk was a similar communist invasion, and FORJA believed that a German invasion was only a potential risk, whereas British dominance of the Argentine economy was a reality. 42. A diplomatic mission by the British Lord Willingdon arranged commercial treaties whereby Argentina sent thousands of cattle to Britain at no charge, decorated with the Argentine colors and with the phrase "Good luck" written on them. El Pampero and Forja criticized this arrangement, with Arturo Jorich and Homero Manzi proclaiming, "These are the goods that are not being sent to our needy compatriots in the provinces." 43. After Pearl Harbor, the cargo ship Victoria, which the German submarine U-201 damaged in error on 18 April 1942, 44. The cargo ship Rio Tercero, which the German submarine U-202 sank in error off New York on 22 June 1942. The situation changed dramatically after the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor and the subsequent American declaration of war upon Japan. During the third consultation meeting of Foreign Ministers of the Americas, 1942 Rio Conference, the U.S. tried to get every Latin American country to join the Allies to generate a continent-wide resistance to the Axis. But the government of Castillo, through Foreign Minister Enrique Ruiz Guiñazú, opposed the American proposal. From that moment onwards, relations between both countries worsened, and American pressure for Argentine entry into the war began to increase. 45. Castillo did, however, declare a state of emergency after the attack on Pearl Harbor. 46. Military plots. Main article, United Officers Group. Castillo's term was due to end in 1944. Initially, it was arranged that Agustin Pedro Justo would run for president for a second time, but after his unexpected death in 1943, Castillo was forced to seek another candidate, finally settling on Robustiano Patron Costas. 46. The army, however, was neither willing to support the electoral fraud that would be necessary to secure Costas' victory, nor to continue conservative policies, nor to risk Costas breaking neutrality. A number of generals reacted by creating a secret organization called the United Officers Group, GOU, to oust Castillo from power. Future President Juan Perón was a member of this group, but did not support an early coup, recommending instead to postpone the overthrowing of the government until the plotters had developed a plan to make necessary reforms. The coup was to take place close to the elections, should the electoral fraud have been confirmed, but it was instead carried out earlier in response to rumors of the possible sacking of the Minister of War, Pedro Pablo Ramírez. 47. It is not known for certain whether Patron Costas would have maintained neutrality or not, but some declarations of support to Britain and his ties with pro-Allied factions suggest that had he become president he would have declared war. 48. The military coup that deposed Castillo took place on 4 June 1943. It is considered the end of the infamous decade and the starting point of the self-styled revolution of 43. Arturo Rossin took power as de facto president. The nature of the coup was confusing during its first days. German embassy officials burned their documentation fearing a pro-Allied coup, while the U.S. Embassy considered it a pro-Axis coup. 4950. Rossin met with a delegate from the British Embassy on 5 June and promised to break relations with the Axis powers and declare war within 72 hours. This turn of events enraged the GOU, as did Rossin's choices for his cabinet. A new coup took place, replacing Rossin with Pedro Pablo Ramírez. 51. Thus, Rossin became the shortest non-interim president in Argentine history. 52. One of the first measures of the new Ramírez government was to prohibit Acción Argentina and its pro-Allied advocacy activities. 35.